Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Danielle Conway, and I am the president of the Association of American Law Schools. You are currently in the How to Become a Law Professor webinar. So if you are looking for how to become a dean, that's another webinar. We can't help you here. But we're excited that you are here. You will eventually become a dean, but right now, the programming that we have for you is to introduce you to the pipeline into the Legal Academy. I have the distinct honor and pleasure to introduce a colleague and a friend, Professor Alina Allen. Alina previously served as Dean of the LSU Paul M. Herbert Law Center. She also served as the interim dean of the University of Arkansas School of Law. Before that, she was closely connected with the Association of American Law Schools, serving as the deputy director of the organization. If you do not recognize the AALS, we are the Learned Society for the Legal Academy, as well as the member organization. So your moderator and planner of this program has significant expertise to help you think about your path to the Legal Academy. So without further ado, I am excited to hand you over to Professor Alina Allen.
Thank you so much, Dean Conway, for that gracious introduction. I'm excited to be able to moderate this panel. I have a wonderful panel of guests for you today. I will only give very, very brief introductions of the panelists. First, I have Dean Elizabeth Crunk Warner from the S.J. Quinney School of Law at the University of Utah. I have Dean LaVonda Reed from the University of Baltimore School of Law. I have Professor Andy Baczynski, who is the clinical director of the Elliott Milstein Civil Advocacy Clinic at American. And I have John Parsi, who is my colleague here at LSU, and Amanda Fisher, who is an assistant professor of law at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. So thank you all to the panelists for being here. Thank you all for being here. I think I speak for all of us when I say being a law professor is a really, really fun job. And I'm glad that you're considering it. I think it can be very, very rewarding. So I hope that you embrace it and that you are very successful along your journey. And any one of us would be helpful along your path as needed. When you become a law professor, typically you go through AALS. We all talk about the 4-form. A long time ago, we talked about the meat market, which no longer exists, where we would go to Washington, D.C. and interview all at one time at a Washington hotel. That has gone by the wayside, but we still have the 4-form. And AALS sponsors the 4-form, and we're going to talk about it a lot during this panel. And I thought it would be good at the outset for Alexa to walk you through it so that you can visually appreciate what we're talking about. And so Alexa is a wonderful staff member of the AALS, and she's going to demo the 4-form for us.
All right, thanks, Elena. Let me go and share my screen. All right, there we go. So we start on far.als.org, so you can create a new account, or if you've used the FAR before, you can log in again. If you are a brand new candidate, you would just click here, create an account. It just asks for basic information, name and email. But if you are returning, you can just log in, you can reset your password. I have already created an account. Sorry.
So the 4-form is basically your application to law schools across the country. So you fill out the form, and every hiring chair for every member school or member fee-paid school has access to the form. And it's a wonderful way to get your materials out to all law schools. That's not to say you won't directly apply to some law schools that you are really interested in, but it's a nice way to make sure that you are reaching every potential employer when it comes to the legal profession.
You. So I'm just going to run through, show you all what it looks like, what you'll need to fill out. But as you just saw, I logged in, so we'll go through the various pages. This will be the first screen you see when you log in. You will need to fill out the contact information page first. Everything will be locked until this is filled out. But once this is filled out, you can choose the order in which you fill out your various pages. It just asks for your basic contact information. It's very important to note at the bottom of every page that you click this dark blue Save and Continue button. If you move to another page and you have not pressed this, you will lose the information. So just to be safe, always click it, even if you don't change anything, just to make sure that you don't have to refill out information. You also have options here in terms of filling out what types of positions you are seeking. So we have subject area entry level, subject area lateral, clinical legal education, and legal writing. As you can see here, it's a multi-select, so just choose whatever applies to you. Then we have the demographic information. So you can select from these drop-down menus, or you can indicate other so that you can write in your response. It is all optional, so there is a prefer not to disclose field. And this information is used only in aggregate by ALS for research purposes, and it's not shared with schools or other third parties. Then we have your education, so you can put up to 4 degrees here. So you'll see here I have first law degree, so that would be your JD. We have a pretty extensive drop-down menu of law schools, but you can also, if they're not included, put in the text field here. And then you'll see here there's a checkbox for if you were a member of a law review, and you'll just fill that information out. We also have advanced degrees, so a master's or a PhD, undergraduate. And you'll see here I have advanced law degree, so that would be if you have an SJD or an LLM or another degree similar to that. And again, always important to save and continue. Here we have teaching preferences and publications. So you can put up to 5 subjects that you'd be most interested in teaching, and this would be in the order of preference. It's a pretty long list of subjects, but we do have an other option in case the subject you are interested in teaching is not included here. As you see, I only have 4, so I would just click this and add a 5th option. And again, you would just select from the drop-down. If you need to explain anything, especially for the other option, there's a text field here where you can add in some additional information. We also have on this page major published writing and publications. So you would just indicate here the number of publications you have. You can provide details for up to 5 publications. So just ask for basic information, the name of your publication, citation, and the web address if applicable. Only one of them can be unpublished, so make sure to click this checkbox if it has been accepted for publication. And like I said, you can include up to 5, so you would just add an additional box if you want to add more publications. The last thing on this page is your geographic restrictions. So you can fill it out 2 ways: if you will only accept a position in a certain location, or if you will not accept a position in a certain location. And again, it's a drop-down menu, so you would just select which location is applicable. Then we have employment experience, so you can add up to 7 positions, and there's a drop-down menu for employment type. The first one I've selected here is law school teaching, and you'll notice here that compared to other employment types, there's a couple of additional fields that do come up for it, so you can have the drop-down menu of your school, the type of position you had, and the subjects that you taught. For all other employment types, you'll see it's just basic employer information and your title. And then if you are okay with your employer being contacted, you just make sure you click this checkbox. And again, it's up to 7 positions. And then there's a text box here if you need to explain anything or add anything additional. Here we have bar and references. So if you have been admitted to the bar, just make sure to check this box. And then there's a drop-down menu for all the states. And then if there's any other area not listed, there is a text field. You can include up to 3 references, and it just looks for basic contact information about these references. And then we have an additional comments box at the bottom. This will be the last text field you will see on any of the pages. So if there's anything missing, you can fill out anything missing on this box right here. The last page that you have to fill out is your CV and your documents. So you can upload a CV, a research agenda, and a job talk paper. These are not required, but you can fill them out. You'll see here it says no file chosen, so that means that nothing has been uploaded. It can look a little confusing at times, so I'll show you what it looks like. If you click choose a file, I'll just put in a random document. And you'll see the document name. That's how you know that something is uploaded. And then you'll see here under research agenda, no file chosen, so that's how you know that nothing has been. And then our last page is your opportunity to review your FAR application. When we go live, which currently the FAR is closed for the academic year, there's no way to submit. But once we go live, we plan to launch on June 1st. There will be an option to pay your FAR fee and submit your FAR form. But for right now, you can click this preview your FAR application. And this is just what it looks like all together, all of the information that you filled out on all of the pages. So again, we plan to open on June 1st, and you will all be notified when we open. But I think with that, Lena, that's all I have. Thank you.
Alexa, thank you. The fee is $290, but there are fee waivers, so don't let the cost dissuade you. If cost is an issue, please apply for a fee waiver. There is one question, Alexa. Does the FAR ask for other court admissions, DC Circuit or 10th Circuit, etc., or is it only state?
I believe it's just state, but yeah, it's just state.
Okay, thank you. So thank you so much, Alexa. You did a great job. So I have questions for the panelists, and the last 20 minutes I'm going to reserve to read questions from the chat. So if any questions come up, please put them in the chat and I'll go through them with the last 20 minutes of the time that we have. My first question goes to the deans, and that's applications have been up for the last couple of cycles. Do you think that's going to translate to more robust hiring in the fall through the spring of 26-27?
Dean Reed, I'm happy to defer to you first.
Oh, sure, sure. Thank you, Alina. Thank you, Dean Warner. Um, Maybe. Everything, a typical law school answer. So, of course, we're seeing a record applications for law school this year. I think across all of the country, applications are up significantly, which means that there's a lot of interest in law school. The question will be, though, whether we can admit as many students as want to come to law school. And we do have a lot of concerns about quality of the credentials and the ability of people to pass the bar exam and the ability of people to get jobs when they graduate 3 or 4 years from their start date. So it really depends. There are a lot of uncertainties in legal education right now, but we're always looking for great talent. And so sometimes we will make opportunity hires, even if we don't actually have an immediate need. And we really do try to match the hires with the needs that we have in our curriculum. And I'll toss it over to some of the other panelists who may want to weigh in as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Dean Reed. I would add to that, and of course, I can only speak for my college, the S.J. Quinney College of Law at the University of Utah. But even though applications are up, we are not growing our JD class. In fact, we're going to shrink it a little bit. I am worried about the entry-level job market for JDs. And so by keeping the class smaller, I feel pretty comfortable that we can commit to finding our graduates or helping them find careers that will be fulfilling. So we are not growing our JD class, but that's not to say that we're not increasing hiring. We have been growing. We have both a bachelor's and a master's of legal studies in addition to our JD. And those programs are growing quite significantly. So we just did our first, we had our first full-time Master's of Legal Studies law professor start with us in July, so that he's completing his first full year. And so the only difference from him, he's tenure track, just as the rest of my faculty are. And the only difference there is all of his classes are being taught in the master's program. So while I don't foresee an immediate need to increase hiring for our JD program, our master's program is growing, and also interestingly, we just launched our bachelor's, and we already have 169 students in our bachelor's program, and it's predicted to maybe get as large as 1,000 students. So we will be likely growing our faculty, but kind of what classes folks will be teaching might be a little bit different in the future. And I think other law schools are in similar positions as other law schools create different programs and launch different programs. So it might not be that. So we're going to need lots of faculty, but faculty teaching portfolios might look a bit different moving forward.
Thank you. So I think one of the questions that always comes up is, how does somebody know when they're ready to submit the FAR form? How do they define their scholarly agenda? And so what tips do you have on defining readiness for a candidate?
I'll just start off by saying I don't think there is a one clear ready point. And I'm sure people can fill in because it's kind of all over the board depending on what you're looking for. But there's no right path and there's no right time. I feel like I will put myself out there as the person, the one consistency of my path is that I failed at everything I tried. So failed first semester of law school, failed first semester of college, failed in my first teaching job. And so I do think that there is, as I'm sure folks will talk about, a preferred path that maybe makes it easier to becoming a law faculty member, but you can be a failure just like me and still succeed.
Thank you, Dean Warner. Professor Parsi, for you, how did you know when you were ready?
Yes, that's a great question. So I practiced law for a decade before I decided that I was ready to, and I knew when I went to law school that I wanted to be a law professor, but life had other plans, right? I graduated from law school in 2010, right when the legal economy collapsed. So it was a very different environment, and I ended up taking a clerkship in Alaska and spent most of my time there. And the way that I knew was I was working at a nonprofit. I'd been working at a AmLaw 100 firm. Did not like it. Was not a positive experience. And was like never again. Was hired to run a nonprofit. The nonprofit had some struggles with our founder, and I was like, nope, it's time. This is what I've always wanted to do. So I applied for a VAP. Hadn't published anything since I have a PhD, so I had a dissertation, but that wasn't published externally. And I'd written an article, a note that was published when I was in law school. Applied for VAPs right about April, May, was given a couple of options and accepted one and started in August. So it moved very quickly for me. And then 2 years into the VAP, I had the option to extend it to a third year, but I thought, no, it's time. I want to get on the tenure track. And so I applied, and I went on the market for my VAP with one article that had been accepted for publication, was about to be published. So I know that the old rule used to be more publications, but I think that many institutions are not looking for three or more, which I think was the loose rule previously. One publication or one publication quality job talk paper or a publication and a job talk paper that is a publication quality seem to be sufficient in terms of that preparation these days.
Thank you. So a VAP is a visiting assistant professor position, which a lot of schools have. They are non-tenure track positions that you apply for. Typically, the duration is 1 to 3 years. Professor Budzinski, you are a clinician. And so sometimes people will use clinical positions as a route into doctrinal positions. What do you think of that approach? And what was your path to Legal Academy?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be in conversation with you all. So I'm going to start with my path because I think it'll inform my answer to the clinic to doctrinal shift. So I started my career in teaching pretty early. I was a staff attorney right out of law school in a gap year that I had before I took a clerkship in the district here. And that staff attorney position was in a law school clinic. So I was taking on an excess of cases that clinic had had for reasons I won't go into. But it was that combination. I knew I wanted to do direct client services, and actually that setting and some of my mentors sort of shifted me towards finding entry points into clinical teaching specifically. So I did a fellowship program for 2 years, geared towards figuring out what clinical teaching and the pedagogy of that is, and followed up with a visitorship that was almost a second fellowship before I myself went on the market. Um, so I was really focused on finding clinical teaching positions. That was sort of my endpoint, and I'm fortunate that I've found that. Um, I think there are definitely ways to shift from clinical teaching into doctrinal teaching. I think like any job, the more your resume has a particular kind of experience, the more fit your resume is to those kinds of positions, and that some schools may be looking for someone who has done a particular type of teaching for a particular type of teaching position. That doesn't mean you can't shift from one kind to another in any direction. So what I would just encourage folks to think about is, what kind of teaching position are you looking for? If you are looking at a clinic, is it because supervising students in the practice of law is something that you're interested in and want to learn more about and do? If your goal ultimately is to shift to doctrinal teaching, to also be thinking about how to engage things like scholarship, and the kinds of things that schools will look for on a resume for tenure track or doctrinal positions.
Thank you. Professor Fisher.
Yes.
So same question. Your background, how did you become a law professor? And what do you think about people using non-tenure track legal writing positions as an entree into a doctrinal position?
Okay. So I'm a very non-traditional person who somehow accidentally made their way into legal academia. And I love it. It's the best job in the entire world. I went to a no-name law school, and in my second and third years, I was a dean's fellow for our legal writing department, and I fell in love with teaching. The unfortunate part for me was that I was at a no-name law school. So I then was advised to go get a PhD from a reputable school and make my path to teaching that way. So I did that, got my PhD right after I got my JD. I started teaching because I love teaching in actually a staff position where I taught required courses as a staff member. And then that role transitioned into a non-tenure track visiting position, and eventually led to tenure track. I also did a 1-year visitorship at Seattle University, which is well known for legal writing. I knew already that I wanted to teach legal writing. And I went on the market from there, and that's how I ended up here at the University of Arkansas. So I will say, to kind of put it out there and at the front, the position I have now is tenure track, and that's not always the case for legal writing. But that was something that was important to me, particularly having gone through the extra process of getting a PhD. As far as using legal writing as a stepping stone, I think that is probably ill-advised. Like Professor Bazinski was saying, you kind of get a brand on your resume. It doesn't mean that people can't change their minds and shift later on in their careers. I think it's also important to know or to remember that both clinical teaching and legal writing, not the same, but also have their own discipline and their own specific pedagogical tools that we use to carry out our discipline. And so it can be tricky, I think, if you are specifically using a position like that to try to step to something else. I also think it sometimes alienates both sides of the coin. If you are using legal writing as a stepping stone, sometimes that can be kind of clear to the legal writing field, and then they are not going to be inclined to hire you to teach legal writing either. And so you might kind of find yourself in a sticky situation.
Thank you. Dean Conway, this isn't so you want to become a dean, but you do have a very interesting path to Legal Academy. And so I want to give you an opportunity to share that with us.
Yes, and you can actually read about that on the presidential theme on the AALS Lens website. I actually started as a legal research and writing instructor, and I actually did not find the same kind of tension as Professor Fisher talked about. In fact, what I found was that people were very interested in my commitment to scholarship. And so there are many law schools, and thank you for whoever put no name law school in quotes. I don't refer to any law school that way. I am the president of the ALS, and we represent all law schools. And we are also representing all law schools in an effort, a collective effort, to break down silos and to break down elitism in the profession, particularly with respect to tenured track, tenured, non-tenure line faculty. And so that is one of my themes when you go to, thank you, Jim, for putting that in the chat. When you go to AALS Lens, what I will say is that when I articulated a scholarly agenda, I received assistance from deans all the way to peer colleagues helping me to refine that scholarly agenda. And it was that scholarly agenda that seemed to animate the interest in my candidacy. I could have stayed a legal writing instructor. I had a very good opportunity to do that at Georgetown University Law Center. But I went on the doctrinal market after 2 years in that position, and I used that position to learn about legal critical pedagogy. And so I was forthright with people that that's what I was using that position to do, to educate myself about legal critical pedagogy. And then I was picked up in a doctrinal position, and I have worked at 6 or 7 law schools since then, before becoming a dean at University of Maine School of Law and now a dean at Penn State Dickinson Law. And I can say, as dean at Penn State Dickinson Law, my colleagues are tenure track legal writing. They're tenure track, but they write in all kinds of areas. I have a colleague who's writing in anti-Semitism in the law, and she's presenting at Harvard, and she is a tenure track faculty teaching legal writing at Penn State Dickinson Law.
Thank you, Dean Conway. So we have 3 faculty members who are in the 3 different buckets: doctrinal, clinical, and legal writing. Can you speak to how your teaching loads differ? And I'll start with you, Professor Fisher. What's your teaching load? How many students are you teaching?
So my teaching load is the same as everyone else here as far as the number of courses. We all have a 2-2. So we teach two classes or 2 sections in fall and 2 classes or sections in the spring. Now, that being said, my classes are significantly smaller than some of my colleagues who teach casebook classes or podium classes. My classes are usually around 15 to 17 students per section. So I'll have generally 30-ish, maybe 34-ish students total. And I keep them for the whole year. So I get them at the very beginning and I keep them for the entire year, but technically they are 2 separate sections of the same course: legal writing 1 in the fall and 2 sections of legal writing 2 in the spring. So that the smaller section size accounts for a lot of the one-on-one that I do in my classes in my role as a legal writing instructor, that not not everyone does in the larger classes because you can't with that many students.
Thank you. Professor Badinsky.
Yeah, so I'm going to caveat my answer with there are different kinds of clinical professor roles at different law schools. I happen to be at a school where we have unitary tenure, so I'm a clinical professor who is also on the tenure track. At some other schools, there are presumptively renewable contracts for clinical instructors or professors, which is viewed as reasonably similar to tenure. And there are some short-term contract positions, which might be 1 to 3 years. So I just want to sort of contextualize that my teaching load looks the same as it does for my colleagues as well. I have a student supervision load. So for each instructor in a clinic, we supervise 6 students, and that includes both the field work and a clinic seminar. I also work with a practitioner in residence, which is a short-term kind of fellowship like program, who also supervises 6 students. And then we are also expected to teach a course outside of the clinical program, presumptively. That can look different, and in ways, there are opportunities to teach what you would like to teach and to enter different kinds of classes in this kind of role. So, for example, starting next year, I'll be teaching civil procedure. Some of my colleagues teach seminar, some will teach an elective course that is still a podium course. So in this particular role that I have sort of my foot in both pools.
Thank you. Professor Parsi.
Yeah, I teach a 2-2, except for this semester where I've picked an where I've been voluntold to take an overload. So I'm teaching a 3-2 this year, and all podium classes. My 1L class this semester is about 78 students. I have about 56 students in family law, and I have about 30 students, which is in the overload class, criminal procedure 2. And that's pretty typical. A 2-2 is typical at our institution.
Thank you. So we talked about teaching. Scholarship is always an issue, and your scholarly agenda is a huge piece of readiness to apply for a law teaching job. Can we talk a little bit about how to build a scholarly agenda? And I know right now in this climate, there's a lot of questions about what happens if your research interests lie in topics that might be controversial. So any thoughts about that? I'll start with Dean Reed.
Sure, thank you. So I would start by saying, be true to yourself. The issues that you are passionate about might, in fact, be deemed by other people to be controversial. I think in searching for a place that you want to land, you want to do your research about the institutions that you are applying to try to discern whether it is a place that is going to be supportive of your ideas or academic freedom, generally speaking. And I would not necessarily shy away from it. But I think all of us are looking for candidates who are able to talk about issues, whether they're deemed to be controversial or not, in a way that's academic, in a way that's clear and coherent, and also in a way that is, and to be able to discuss these issues in a way that is civil. And so I'm thinking, when you're out doing interviews and job talks and things like that, to keep those ideals top of mind, you want to be able to engage in the work in a way that is intellectually stimulating, but not necessarily bombastic and provocative in a way that's not academic. We expect all faculty to be able to govern themselves in a way that is civil, to be able to discuss have difficult conversations, talk about difficult topics in a way that advances knowledge, advances legal education, and we expect all of our faculty to govern themselves in a way that's also a good role model for all of our students who are going to be coming into the profession behind us. So I wouldn't necessarily shy away from it, but think long and hard about how you want to present it and how you want to present yourself in a way that is true to yourself, but also brings honor to the legal academy and also to our profession.
Thank you. Dean Conway, do you want to weigh in?
Dean Reed's answer was extraordinary. I feel like I want to take everything you said and just continue to apply it to my own work. I would say the very same thing. This is not worth doing if you are somehow reticent about approaching your scholarly agenda. Your voice matters. The things you are interested in matter. I do commend the article that was put in the chat to understand what academic freedom looks like so that you know what your obligations are with whatever scholarly agenda that you land on. It is not writing whatever you want to write. It is engaging with integrity, with fact, with history, with very deep and considered research to arrive at your arguments, to arrive at your analysis, to arrive at your conclusions. And that is what needs to be communicated, as Dean Reed said, in a way that promotes conversation and consideration among your colleagues, because the legal academy is an academy of colleagues.
Yeah, and if I may, just building on the excellent statements by Dean Reed and Dean Conway, I wanted to jump in on something that Dean Conway just mentioned, kind of leading your research with integrity. Where I see this, where this issue has come up for me, sitting in my chair, has been not so much legislative or outside external actors pushing back on the subject matter of what colleagues are writing about or researching, rather in the hiring process, my colleagues saying, I think X candidate hasn't done that deep dive research to really show and demonstrate that the assertion that they're making in their article is in fact true. So it's interesting. I see kind of more of exactly what Dean Conway is saying in terms of that integrity, more of the question coming up of, has this person really done the deep dive on their research to justify their assertions? As my colleague, Professor Leslie Culver says, prove it. Have you proven it? And so that's probably where I see it coming up way more than ideologically, but in terms of external actors. But then I'll also add, at the beginning of this wonderful session, we saw the FAR form, and it was mentioned that there are places on the FAR form where you can state where you won't go. Be honest about that, right? If you really don't want to work in a certain state or a certain city, for whatever reasons, knowing your own values and what's important and true to you, then be honest in your FAR form. I think that helps out a lot.
So, Dean Warner, that's an interesting statement. I'm older than I look. And when I went on the market almost 20 years ago, the advice I got was to not put any geographic restrictions because that signaled that I wasn't really serious about wanting to be a law professor generally, that I wanted to sort of be picky and choosy, and that it would be much better for me to decline an interview than to put on the form that I had geographic restrictions. And we have a wonderful group. What do we think? Has that advice changed? Especially now with the sort of red state, blue state divide and people having strong opinions about where they want to live and where they don't want to live. Do we think that's outdated?
I mean, since I said it, I'll just chime in and say I got similar advice. I know exactly what you're talking about. Sitting in the decanal chair, it annoys me to no end when you have struggled, and our hiring committees, it is hard to kind of narrow it down to even those first screener interviews, to kind of narrow it down. And you reach out to somebody and they're like, oh, I would never move to Utah. That's just really frustrating. It's even more frustrating if you come back as a finalist and you had no interest in moving to Utah. So I'm speaking as a dean who has limited time and doesn't want to waste time, but I also received that feedback as well, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Thank you. So you mentioned the FAR. Let's talk about how schools use the FAR form in their hiring process. Dean Conway, how does Penn State Dickinson Law use the form?
So we use the FAR form, not similar to many others. We usually are not going out to the entire cohort. We know what our disciplinary needs are. And so we will call the form And because our law school has a commitment to practice, we like to actually reach out to people who have actual practice experience. So the FAR form gives us a hint as to who those people are. And then we cull it for the way that we like to build our pool. Doesn't mean that we won't give a look to someone freshly minted out of a VAP, a visiting assistant professor position, but we have a strong core value of practice readiness. And so our faculty, the majority of them have practiced law.
Thank you. Professor Badinsky, how does AUWCL use the FAR form?
So at both my current institution and my previous institution, we used it similarly to what Dean Conway just described in terms of seeing who might fit the curricular needs of our hiring season. And I'm sure you'll get to this, so I don't want to jump ahead, but we also accept direct applications for positions based on the posting that goes out. And so I think both of those are strong sources of applicants for us.
Thank you. When you apply directly, sort of what are the pitfalls there? Dean Warner.
Yeah, so I'll be honest. For us, the majority of kind of the folks who we're going to do those initial screening interviews with do come through the FAR form. And that's because I think oftentimes the folks who are doing direct applications to us and are not going through the ALS FAR form, they haven't kind of put thought into what they would teach, what their research agenda would be. It seems that not all, but a lot of those folks seem to be, we get a lot of folks who are like, I'm, retiring. I've had a great career and I'd really love to teach. Well, that's wonderful, but what would you teach? How would you teach? What's your research agenda? But I will say the exception is it does not happen uncommonly that we will have a direct application of somebody who's also in the FAR form, and they'll say in their cover letter, I am applying because I'm really excited about the University of Utah. And that person, regardless of whether or not they came up in an initial kind of culling of the FAR forms, is somebody that we will take a hard look at. So, if you're in the FAR form, we'll fight, and we're hiring in that area because, like Dean Conway and like Andy said, we too usually start with we have some curricular need. But when we have folks who are in the FAR form, but then also do a direct application, that's a love language, right? It's we're really excited about you. And so we usually respond more favorably towards those individuals.
Thank you. Dean Reed, can you walk us through what a callback interview looks like? I assume you're doing them by Zoom right now?
Sure,
When you do them?
we're
I'm
doing
sorry, not a callback, the first round.
the
right?
first interview,
Call
yes.
You call the four forms. You want to invite people for an interview for the first round. What does that look like?
Sure. So we call the form. We also take direct applications. I love that, Dean Warner. We call that a love language. It does show a different level of interest in the particular institution if you took all the time to write a love letter to us. And so that's really well received, I think. We also are hiring for curricular needs by and large. And with some of the stressors on higher education now as relates to the ability of students to get the financing for law school, as it relates to some of the challenges that some of our peer schools and colleges might have in the hard sciences, for example, as it relates to their ability to get external funding. We know there are lots of pressures on our institutions writ large. And so we are really good stewards of the finances of the institution. And so when we go out searching, by and large, we're looking for to fill a specific need. So when a person signs on to the Zoom call, they'll probably have a lot of questions like, tell us a little bit about why you're interested in us. Tell us a little bit about what you're interested in teaching. Have you done any research? Tell us a little bit about your job experience. It's really a get to know you to find out whether you are someone that we might see as a good colleague to invite into our community who's got an interest in the things that matter to us and fit with our mission. So are you interested in teaching? Are you interested in only teaching one thing and you're not willing to consider teaching anything else? Because we need people who are team players who are willing to sometimes pivot and teach things, be voluntold to teach courses that they might not have ordinarily thought that they were going to teach. And when we're trying to manage our resources, our scarce resources of time and money in an environment like this, we're really looking to invite people into our communities who are in alignment with where we're trying to go and are willing to be a team player. So the first interview is probably going to be lots of questions, just kind of getting to know who you are, and there will be an opportunity for the candidate to ask questions of the committee as well at each stage in the interview process. And you should always have questions. One thing that I tell students as well as people who are interviewing for any kind of job is when you go to the interview, you should always have some questions to ask them and ask them about themselves. People like to talk about themselves. They like to brag about their institutions. It also allows you to get an insight as to who they are as well, because it's a relationship, and it potentially is a career-long relationship if you're on the tenure track and you're trying to figure out whether you like them and they're trying to figure out whether they like you enough to invite you to the second interview.
Thank you. I also like to say that you have 30 minutes, and I've been on those 30 minutes where a candidate will spend 15 minutes answering the first question, and we are all shifting uncomfortably looking at our watches. So be mindful of being concise when you answer the questions, right? Not too quick, but don't talk and talk and talk, because every candidate gets the same 7 or 8 questions, and you're at an extreme disadvantage if you've only answered 3 and the committee had 8 questions for you. So you survived the initial Zoom. The school is excited about you. You're offered a callback. Most people are thinking about their job talk at that point. So tips for the job talk. And again, we have a legal writing professor. We have a clinician. Do those job talks look different? Should they be different? Should you ask those questions on the front end? Should it be more scholarly or pedagogical? What's sort of the thought of the panel? And I'll start with you, Professor Fisher.
Thank you. This is a great question. So I was really fortunate the year that I was on the market, and I took several callbacks. And I will say that almost every single one was different. Part of that was some of the schools that I interviewed with did not have legal writing on the tenure track. And those schools typically wanted something a little bit more like a teaching demonstration, and they weren't as interested in my research or my scholarship. Some of the schools that I interviewed with were looking for candidates who could do both. And I have taught crim law at 2 institutions as well. And so I think sometimes they wanted to see a little bit of a teaching demonstration and a little bit of scholarship. And then the schools like University of Arkansas that were solidly on the tenure track, they wanted a traditional job talk the same as anyone else for any other position. I do think that the key is asking, and don't be afraid to ask. I had one committee that didn't give me very clear instructions, and I didn't realize until I was about to give my job talk that what I had prepared might not have been exactly what they were looking for. It still went fine. Everything was fine. I got an offer from that school, but it was a moment of panic for me, thinking, oh no, did I prepare what they're looking for? So I think if you are in a track that is, for any reason, maybe a little non-traditional or skills-based, don't be afraid to ask the committee, ask those questions, what's expected of you, so that you can be as prepared as possible.
Thank you. Professor Parsi, tips about the job talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think as much as the substance matters, what really matters is it's an assessment of your collegiality and your ability to teach, right? We're looking for people who are engaging, who know the material, who can explain the material, particularly to an audience who doesn't have subject matter expertise but understands the law. And so that is what that is, right? I mean, we kind of have a sense that they like you as a colleague, otherwise they wouldn't have brought you in for a callback. You're going to have lunches and meetings with other faculty for that, but it really is, are you dynamic? Do you understand your topic? Are you engaging? Do you think our students would like you as a teacher? How are you going to present and how solid are you in presenting your argument? So that's what I would focus on in my job talk, my approach to job talk. And you always know it better than anyone else. Have that confidence. No one knows it as well as you do. So present with, it's not arrogance, it's confidence in what you're saying and what you've done.
Thank you, Professor Parsi. Professor Badinsky.
So I'll echo what Professor Fisher said in terms of just clarifying what kind of job talk you're expected to give. I do not think that isn't, it's not rude or bothering people to ask. And I think everyone will be happier if you're doing what they expect you to do, including yourself. So, if I would just add here that if you are giving a talk for a clinic and it is regarding either the teaching of the clinic or to explain the model of the clinic, there are articles out there that kind of talk about the touch points of what to consider, for example, in designing a clinic. That can be really useful just to set up to make sure you're talking about some of the main things that schools will be thinking about for how to direct a clinic and that you will want to cover. So I would just recommend doing that sort of legwork in preparing that presentation. And I'll just add to what Professor Parsi said for the scholarly job talk, which is, faculties are not a monolith like any group. So some will be looking for teachers, some will be looking for scholars. So just think about your various constituencies, be an engaging presenter. Think about how to use a PowerPoint. That seems to be standard now, and you might want to think about that in your own presentation. But also, know who else is writing in the field you have written in to be able to drop a name or two and show you are engaged in that conversation. Because I think that is something that faculty who are focused on scholarship are interested in seeing from their colleagues as well.
Thank you. So there was a question about elaborating on the job talk. Typically, there is a paper, at least a draft, if not a draft of a paper that has already been accepted for publication. So you would typically upload that paper with your form, and then you would present on that paper for the job talk that we've been talking about. Dean Warner, when you get a callback interview, in addition to the job talk, there are office interviews, typically with faculty colleagues, typically with the dean. There's typically a dinner and a lunch. And sometimes it's those soft skills that trip up candidates. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and thank you so much. And just so everybody knows, I actually asked Professor Ellen if she could call on me because we've been running into some trouble lately, I would say in the past 2 years, with candidates who are very rude and disrespectful of staff. So folks who are trying to arrange their travel, folks who are, doing reimbursements. And in my case, oftentimes my executive assistant is doing our candidates' travel, and she's my bestie in the College of Law. And so if you're treating my bestie poorly, like that's in the back of my head. And it's been to of such a degree with at least one candidate where it came up in the conversation about that candidate's candidacy, and the candidate was not offered a job as a result. So just be sure that you're being nice to everyone because, law schools are relatively small ecosystems and staff are people too. So just as much as we want to get along with our faculty colleagues, we want to get along with our staff colleagues. So just something to be aware of.
Thank you. So I want to get to the questions in the chat, but before I do that, we have three deans. And so to my three deans, what can you negotiate? You go through the callback, you get the offer, the dean calls you and says, we'd love for you to join the law faculty. You get the salary number. What are other things that you can negotiate as an entry-level candidate? And I'll start with you, Dean Conway.
Thank you for that question. So, you may or may not know that Penn State Dickinson Law, the core value is as an anti-racist law school. We take that very seriously. It's not a binary about black and white. It's about equity. It's about ethics. It's about integrity. It's about treating people fairly. And so we have a quasi-unitary tenure system. People are compensated according to a standard model. And so I have had candidates say, well, I've been told to ask for everything. What anti-racism means to our law school is that we provide you everything we are going to provide you because that's what we provided the person before you. And so we don't hold back anything. You get an offer that is complete. Now, what that offer entails is moving expenses. We have a opportunity. Everyone has an opportunity to choose between moving expenses or cash payout because maybe they're coming from New Jersey to South Central Pennsylvania. So they get to elect what it is that they would like. You get an opportunity to come back and visit the school after you get the offer because you probably did a lot of the work on Zoom. So we want you to know what the community looks like. We provide you with access to a realtor. We take you for tours. We take you for dinner. We make sure that you know what the community is like. You get a salary, you get a research stipend, you get a development account, a faculty development account. You get research assistance. So we put everything together in a packet, and you do not have to concern yourself that someone got something you didn't get.
Thank you, Dean Conway. Dean Reed.
Thank you, Dean Conway. Ditto to what Dean Conway said. We do the same. So we put together the whole package of the offer and present it to the candidate at the time of offer. There are times, though, that different things come up along the way. So I don't know whether we'll get a chance to talk about this, but say you've got a partner and your partner is going to be looking for a job as well. You want to bring that up at the time of the second interview. You can drop hints that you have a family along the way, if that's your choice, and people are going to start thinking about how they might get you and get your family there too, right? But negotiating some help for finding a position for a spouse or partner, and if it is a college town and your partner is also an academic, it's good to have these conversations early because there are lots of people that have to be involved in trying to bring that to fruition, including potentially other deans at other schools at the university, maybe at other universities in the town, the provost, maybe the president. And so these things take a lot of time to bring all these people together and try to find something for a spouse. And it can hamper your efforts to respond to an offer in a timely manner if you don't bring it up soon enough, right? I would also say one thing you might be able to negotiate, and this comes up from time to time, people want a deferred start date. So they may have professional or personal reasons that they may not want to start in August of any given year. Maybe they want to start in January. Maybe they want to defer for an entire year. And that is something that you might be able to negotiate with the dean. Of course, it will depend on what the immediate needs are of the school, whether they can afford to do that, how long the position has been open and things like that. If you have family and with children as well, you might negotiate some help in getting your children into the school of your choice, whether it be a private school, because lots of times the hiring happens in the spring. And if you're transitioning children to a new school district, especially if you're trying to consider private schools, the application season might be well underway or complete by the time you interview for the job and get an offer. And you might need assistance from people at your institution to help you navigate those waters and introduce you to different people. One other thing that I would add is credit for prior publications. And so today, when people apply, as we've heard, most people come into the job market with publications already. Back in 20, 30 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case. Then the question is, how much credit do you get for the things that you've already done? And it's important to understand how your school treats those things. It may very well be a flat rule, again, across the board, but it might be something that you have to negotiate with your dean.
Dean Warner, anything to add?
Yeah, everything that's true at the S.J. Quinney College of Law has been stated. As both Dean Conway and Dean Reed said, my entry-level package is pretty set. I do not negotiate base salary for all the reasons that Dean Conway articulated. All of my career line faculty come in with the same salary, and all of my tenure line faculty come in with the same salary. Similarly, kind of the number of classes you're going to teach. We give folks 2 research leaves before they go up for tenure, the first in their first year, and then they do get to pick which semester they take their second one, but we give that to everybody. So our packages are there's not much there to negotiate, but I have negotiated moving expenses. So folks have negotiated me up on moving expenses, where perhaps they have a longer distance to travel or they have a bigger family or something like that. So that is something that I'll negotiate. The other thing that we do negotiate with folks is teaching package. So, oftentimes I mentioned before that we come out and we need something covered. Let's say we need torts covered, but we have our faculty, our tenure line faculty teach 3 classes. So the other 2 classes that you're teaching, we have some flexibility. And so oftentimes that's an opportunity to negotiate that. I just really want to emphasize, and that's it in terms of entry level hiring. When it's a lateral or somebody coming in with experience, that differs. But for entry level, it's a pretty, take it or leave it type of a situation. I just want to emphasize what Dean Reed said about if you are going to need help with either a partner or a family, to let us sooner rather than later, and to be honest whether or not it's a deal breaker. I've had, again, in the last couple of years, at least 2 candidates come through and say, oh, it would be really great if my person could get a position at the University of Utah, but it's not a deal breaker if it doesn't happen. Well, then it turns out it is a deal breaker when I'm unable to do it. And again, super, super frustrating. And it's a relatively small community. We talk to folks. So, if you kind of treat me poorly, I might mention that. I'm not saying that as a threat, but it just kind of naturally comes out. And also, I wanted to second her point on sooner is better than later. If it is a deal breaker, you're going to need help with a partner. Let me know as soon as possible, because the way it works at the University of Utah is the other department, let's say you have a partner that wants a position in nursing. The other department gets to say, I have to send them the CV, and gets to say, we're interested in that person or we're not interested in that person. So if they do say they're interested, which we hope, but then you have to go through the whole process with that department too, in terms of your partner has to come and interview and be accepted by the department. So it can be a lengthy process. And unfortunately, the windows of time when offers can be open, I like to give folks 3 weeks to consider an offer, but I had a situation this past cycle where I was only able to give one person 24 hours. It was that tight of a window to make a decision. And I hate that. And that's unusual, but they can be really quick turnarounds on decisions. And so the more runway you can give us where you need help, the much smoother that can go.
Thank you. So going to the questions from the chat. What is the job market for full-time practicing attorneys to enter teaching on an adjunct basis? Dean, would you like to take that?
It is really about need, and also you have to consider that most schools are bound by accreditation, so the teaching is going to be in person. There will be a percentage allowed for remote education, but I would say about 3/4 has to be in person. So you have to be very willing to commit to that kind of instruction. The other thing is that, um, we have standards for a student focused program of legal education. We host a legal educators workshop every year, so you have to attend that. And then you have to learn about how to engage with students, how to engage in formative assessments as well as summative assessments. So it's a heavy lift for adjuncts when they're new.
Thank you. Do you have advice for foreign candidates from other common law countries?
So I can start. So I'd say the big difference is to know that you need to publish in an American law review. That is like, take it for whatever you will, but that's kind of the standard. If you're publishing in peer-reviewed journals, American law schools, for the most part, won't give it as much credit as they probably might or should, for various reasons. So that is critical. Publishing in an American law review is kind of the currency of the realm for American law schools. So I think that is probably the most helpful factor in terms of making that transition.
Yeah,
Thank you. Go ahead.
I was going to
Good
add
morning.
something that has changed in the past year is, immigration status and getting folks in on a visa. And so you are not legally required to share status at all with law schools, but at the point that you're kind of a finalist, and it goes back to what I was saying before about giving a long runway. So we did hire somebody who was an international citizen last year, and we worked it out, but that person was very upfront with us, is here's what I need for my visa status, here's what my partner needs for their visa status. And so they gave us plenty of advance notice, and so we were able to kind of work through that process and make sure that it was going to work out. And I understand that that's a complicated situation, and it's not a status you need to legally share, but it's just an example of where if you're comfortable sharing, it can make the process go smoother.
How difficult is it to transition from an academic administrative role in student affairs to doctrinal teaching?
I can take that one. The same principles apply, whether you're an administrator or whether you're coming out of practice and trying to teach a doctrinal class. Is we want to know that you are committed to teaching and excellence in teaching, that you have a research agenda, that you are actively trying to advance that research agenda, and that you'll also be a good colleague and a good citizen of the institution. So I think, if you, and this is kind of going back to one of the earlier questions too, apply for the job that you want and the job that is available, but more importantly, the job that you want. I would not think that applying and try to take a job that you think is going to leapfrog you or scoot you to a different job. I wouldn't necessarily use that as a strategy. Because also, if we're for the people that we're hiring for student affairs, for example, we want them to be committed and passionate about student affairs as well. We don't want them kind of just dibbling and dabbling in it, but that's an important job in the school. And so we take it very, very seriously. But I would say nothing is impossible. But if that is your goal, you need to be very intentional about it, to be very serious about it, whether you're taking the admin job first and then hoping to be a professor, or even vice versa, because lots of times, all three deans here, and yourself, Alina, we've all been faculty and we've decided we want to be administrator faculty, right? And so, in each of the jobs, we've had to take very seriously along the way.
And I'll just add, as a former dean, I think that also depends on your relationship with your dean when I served in the decanal role, staff development was really important to me. So if a staff member said that they aspired to that, I would try to find an opportunity for them to do doctrinal teaching, invite them to workshops, try to help develop them. But obviously, if you don't have that type of relationship with your dean, that might not be the route to go. But I know a lot of deans, and most of them are really, really helpful in that regard. And so I would not sort of sleep on that as a resource to sort of help you get to where you want to go. What about lawyers with families who want to stay in state to avoid moving, aging parents, etc.? Should they mark geographic limitations on the FAR? Dean Conway is shaking her head, yes.
Yeah, be upfront. I mean, if that's your situation, that's your situation. You have to do what's best for your entire sphere of stakeholders. And if that's what your family needs, you do what your family needs. It's going to be tough. I mean, these jobs, to get these jobs, they are extraordinarily competitive. I always tell people, and to the point of the last question, if you want to teach in the legal academy and be a teaching faculty member, meaning presumptive contract, meaning tenure track, meaning tenure, you have to apply for those positions. And many times it's not going to be at an institution where you're actually at that host institution. A lot of times you got to get out in order to get the opportunity. I remember a long time ago, I wanted to teach at my alma mater, Howard Law. And they were like, we do not hire our graduates. You will have to get out there and you will have to prove yourself at another institution. And that is a real thing. There's some places where geography allows them to be more flexible, but the idea is that you got to get out there. If this is what you want to do, it may mean moving to Wyoming.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would add, I think I'm going to get the number wrong. President Conway might know better, but I know that there are over 20 law schools now with online JD programs. I think it's around like 22. But that I think is the one, if you want to, it's still a small enough number that you could direct contact those law schools and see if they are hiring into their online program. So that is one thing that is an opportunity for you all. That was not an opportunity for me when I started teaching, is if you really are tied to a specific location, and let's say there's only one or two law schools in the area and you're not willing to commute. And I do know people in the academy who are commuting, Denver to Ohio, like commuting all over the country, Oklahoma to Maine. Like there are people doing big commutes for these jobs. But if you're just not willing to do it, I would also recommend reaching out to those law schools that are offering either hybrid JDs or online JDs and seeing if they're hiring for their online programs.
Is it considered a negative to one's candidacy if they choose not to use the FAR form? Dean Reed, I'll pick on you.
I don't think it's considered a negative. There's probably a missed opportunity though. Even as Dean Warner was saying earlier, the love letter, the extra letter, the direct letter to the school is a nice thing, but the FAR form is in a template. Most of the people that we're considering have filled out the same form. It's all in the same format. It's easy to parse through. All of the relevant questions are there. All of the relevant answers hopefully are there, all in one place, easy to kind of walk through them all and compare candidates. And also, it's a thoughtful template. So the things that are more likely to be important to search committees and to deans are going to be on that form, and you may miss the opportunity if you don't use the form. You may just not even address that particular issue.
We are almost out of time. I want to thank the panelists profusely for their wisdom. I want to say if I did not get to your question, please feel free to email me. It's aallen@waals.org. I'd be happy to stay in dialogue with you and to answer your questions. Typically, the panelists are also open to receiving emails about becoming a law teacher. The Academy really is wonderful. Thank you so much for your interest. As we've all said, this really is the best job in the world, and I really hope you will pursue it as a career. Thank you.